Syracuse Nation, and welcome to yet another edition of Orange Heat. My name is Giovanni as always, and thank you for joining me. As today we are talking Syracuse football, the Orange, fresh off the heels of a big-time victory, opening a new generation under that brand new Carrier Dome roof. Today I am joined by Sam Barber of Mount St. Mary's. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great. It's good. It's so amazing to see a new era of Syracuse football opening up, and especially getting a win.
Yeah, now Sam actually is from my high school back in New York, and he is currently going to school studying broadcasting at Mount St. Mary's College in Maryland. And Sam, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm in my fall semester of my junior year, and I'm a three-sport athlete, cross country, in both indoor and outdoor track and field. As Gio said, I'm studying broadcast journalism with a double concentration in sporting analytics and sports PR. So very excited to be on the show.
Now, Sam and I have grown pretty close. Obviously, we went to the same high school and knew each other there from running into each other in the weight room and things like that. And everything's really grown, and every Saturday we seem to talk Syracuse football. So I figured he'd be the perfect guy to have on, especially because he's honestly like a mentor to me, obviously doing broadcasting at the highest level possible. And it's very exciting to have you on, Sam. So Syracuse, a huge win inside the Carrier Dome today, taking down the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 37-20. And Sam, the big thing about this is this was a must-win game. There's a difference between starting your season 0-2, which is bad in itself, and going 0-3. 0-2, there's still opportunity to turn things around. We saw it a few years ago in 2013, the last time the Orange started 0-2. They end up turning that ship around and going to a bowl game that year in the Texas Bowl, led by quarterback Terrell Hunt and a lot of great guys on that Syracuse squad. So they've shown that they can do it in the past, and there's a big difference between 0-2 and 0-3. Sam, what are your thoughts on the whole 0-2, 0-3, and how this was a must-win game?
Yeah, it was a definite win, must win. There's a difference in the post game feeling of being 1-2 and going into your locker room with a win, and when you go back to the drawing board, and get ready for your next game. You're saying, okay, we have a shot at going to .500, and if you're going into your locker room at 0-3, you're eyeing, if you lose 4 more games, you lose bowl eligibility. And the trajectory and the outlook of the season for Syracuse has changed tremendously. It's a lot more positive than it was even right before kickoff at 11 a.m. I think this is a revitalized Syracuse squad, and I'm excited to see how the team shapes up against the Duke Blue Devils in a few weeks.
Absolutely, Sam. Now, just to take a look at the numbers briefly here, Tommy DeVito goes 13 for 24, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns on the game, and an interception. And those 2 touchdown balls were very pretty. Really an opportunity that the offensive line gave him to sit back in the pocket and do what he was brought here to do. Sling the football deep, set his feet, and he was able to hit Taj Harris for a dime as well as Nykeem Johnson. Both passes were beautiful, and both touchdowns were something that really I think Syracuse fans needed to see out of this kid. What did you have out of those 2 plays?
Oh, yeah. This sort of made me reminisce about the game against North Carolina a few years ago when he threw the absolute bomb to secure the win against the Tar Heels. And it's good to see sort of a mirror of Eric Dungy and his arm. This is exciting to see the development of DeVito. I think him and Culpepper, if they work together, I think they could be a very talented duo in the ACC. But sticking with DeVito, there was an offensive rut in the game against the Tar Heels and the game against Pittsburgh last week. And I think this is definitely the game that DeVito needed to potentially propel the Syracuse offense into the months of October and November.
Sam, I don't think you could be any more right when you say the word offensive rut. It came to a point where it was, as a fan, difficult to watch for a lot of people out there. It seemed like the defense, I will say, was the best Syracuse football defense I have seen in the past 5 years during the Dino Babers tenure and beyond that. And I thought last year's product wasn't terrible. I thought the year before that was pretty darn good when we won 10 football games, considering. And I think this is the best product we've seen. You're talking an opportunity to lead the nation in turnovers. You're talking some very experienced guys in the secondary with Trill Williams, Andre Sisco, of course, an All-American, and Ifatu Melifanu, as well as some young guys like Neil Nunn, amongst other names. And then I think the defensive line was extremely experienced as well. People were worried, and I understand the worry. Alton Robinson goes to the NFL. Guys like, of course, Josh Black able to step up and fill shoes. Kingsley Jonathan able to step up and fill shoes. And I think the defensive line has done a very good job of getting pushed. And I think the big surprise of this defense, Sam, has been the linebacker position. What do you see out of these linebackers?
Yeah, Kingsley Johnson, the step he's taken from last year to this year, it's just you really get a gauge of where your football team is at and where the maturity level is of your team. And this goes any sport, but especially in the football field, you see once you lose a considerable chunk of talent, it's very telling the next fall how are these guys going to step up on the field? Are they going to step up in those big moments? And yes, Georgia Tech is no Clemson. They're no Notre Dame. But this, like you mentioned, it was a must-win game. And for them to step up and for other players to step up as well and come to the plate ready to go, it was exciting to see because, honestly, I think Dino Babers being in his 5th year, he's getting into the sort of must-win territory of games and seasons before the AD is knocking at his door and saying, "Hey, win some football games, or you're out of the carrier dome."
Right, and it's funny you say that. I heard the broadcasters say earlier today, Dino Babers sees this brand new roof, this beautiful new video board, which everybody has just been extremely excited over, new turf. The last thing Dino Babers wants to do is have to hand all that over to somebody else, right? He wants to continue playing games in the Dome, and I think he will. And I think the thing about this season as well, talking about that, as far as Dino Babers' tenure goes and the continuation of it, if he's on the hot seat, so to speak, as people like to call it. I think this is a season that you kind of have to throw away when you're talking about that. How can you hold this against a coach? He has some of his key players opting out and not playing, especially at the running back position with Abdul Adams and Jarvion Howard. He also doesn't have a normal college football schedule. There's a lot of things that play into this. He didn't have a normal spring. He didn't have a normal summer camp. I just don't see how you could hold this against a coach and decide maybe he's on the hot seat after this season as it is. Now, if you're talking next year and we have a completely normal year and the product isn't good, then we can talk. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree because we've had to axe 3 games. Western Michigan, Colgate, who for any CMY fans, or even an SU football fan, that's a staple. And Rutgers, a former Big East foe, we had to axe 3 games, and the absence of Adams, especially, that's a very big storyline. And you're seeing that all across college football, even with some conferences jumping on board to have a season. You're seeing these players opt out. Some of these big name players to opting out, and that changes sort of the team rhetoric and the team outlook. And it's going to be very telling. Like you said, I don't think a AD or a school can hold anything against a program unless you're just a routinely unsuccessful program and you're not putting out winnable seasons, then that would be a case. But Syracuse is not the case. Dino Babers has the pieces. He just needs to develop DeVito and develop that offensive line, and then I think Syracuse can finally finally tell people that 10-win season 2 years ago was no fluke.
Yeah, Sam. And one thing that I think has been key to that as well is on the defensive side of the football this season, the leadership has been impressive. You're looking at losing guys like Kendall Coleman at the defensive end position, who was the core leader of that defense last season. I mean, there's no doubt about it. An all ACC, all academic kind of brain, very vocal out on the field. You lose a guy like that, and now guys have to step up. And I think one of the biggest key pieces to stepping up has been linebacker Michael Jones. The kid is only a sophomore, has 2 interceptions on the game. I think on the season, excuse me. I think he's been a crucial piece in our run defense, which was good through the first 2 weeks of action. And we can talk about it once we talk numbers again in a few minutes here. We did struggle in the run defense department against Georgia Tech here. But I think Michael Jones has not only stepped up, but emerged as one of the best players on this team, and I think could be one of the best linebackers in the ACC going forward in the coming years. And I wouldn't be surprised if this kid only plays college football for 3 seasons, similar to Andre Cisco, and it's looking like Trill Williams might do the same as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the loss of Kendall Coleman. He was such a significant part of Syracuse football, and when you have players step up like that, that was very telling in the game, the LSU Mississippi State game. Joe Burrow, and there was a mass exodus from Baton Rouge, and that was very present today. They lost by 10. For the defending national champions, and they lose by 10 to an unranked Mississippi State squad. That's just a sign of lack of returning players stepping up, and I don't think that was evident in the Syracuse game, and even in the 3 games that we've seen this season. There's a clear sense of leadership, this new wave of leaders coming in, whether they be sophomores, juniors, or even seniors. It's exciting to see that, and even on both sides of the ball, because in order to be a successful football team, you need to have leaders on the offensive end that are going to get you those scores, but also on the defensive end that are going to protect your QB. So,
Sam, my question for you there would be, who is the leader of this offense? Because it doesn't look as Tommy to be that right now. It looked good today. I will say. But at the end of last season, throughout last season, and through the first 2 games, who was the leader of this offense?
To be honest, I think you brought up a very good point. The Tommy DeVito, I believe he's a junior, and he's just not there yet of what a veteran quarterback should be, and obviously we know that he was sort of playing in the shadow of Eric Dungy for quite some time. But I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I usually don't recognize freshmen as leaders, but I think this potentially foreshadows some leadership with Sean Tucker, the incredible game he had, especially for it being he's only in his 3rd collegiate game of his career. And I think that Dino Babers is going to look to Tucker and say, hey, build our offense around this guy. And even though he's not the one that is supposedly running the offense, that would be DeVito. This guy's special. We need to utilize him.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I think Sean Tucker, phenomenal game today, and really stepped up, because obviously Jawar Jordan has been struggling this season, as well as Markenzie Pierre not getting the job done in the run department, really. And then Jawar Jordan goes down with a little bit of, as Dino Babers calls it, an owie. Not a significant injury, but a little bit of inability to play today. Played when he had to. Pierre came in, and Sean Tucker was looked upon to be that number 1 back today, just early into the ball game. And the kid stepped up, 24 carries, which shows me that he continued to prove himself, and they continued to be willing to give him the football. when you have 24 carries, that's a large amount of carries, especially for Syracuse in a game with one running back. He goes 24 carries for 112 yards. We haven't had a guy go over that 100-yard mark in a significant amount of time. I think Mo Neal might have done it in his tenure at Syracuse. But besides that, it's been a while. And then he goes 2 touchdowns. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that for a stat line. And really, like you said, the offense was able to run through him. And the significant thing about this is that it opens up your offense. Not only now are you one-dimensional where they're going to know that you're going to try and pass the ball and you're unable to have success like the previous 2 games. Running the football opens up everything. It opens up the run pass option. It opens up your deep ball threats. It opens up your passing game, and it opens up your running game in itself. It makes you that much more versatile and that much more of a threat on the offensive side of the field. Sam, your thoughts?
Yeah, someone that's watched Syracuse football, it's refreshing to see the amount of scoring outlets that Syracuse has, because in years past, Terrell Hunt, Eric Dungy, you name it, they would be very one-dimensional quarterbacks, and it would be very frustrating because they would go to one or two receivers, and the opposing team would know, okay, yeah, they're going to go for player A, they're going to go for player B. But now the Tommy DeVito, whether this be because of Dino, head coach Babers, they're sharing the ball. And like you said, it opens up the offense. And I think it makes it a lot harder to read. And it clearly tripped up Georgia Tech, even though their offense had a very good showing. It tripped up the Yellow Jackets, and I'm very excited to see whether or not this game style will continue into the future.
Yeah, and I think some clear adjustments were made going into this week. Dino Babers said that there needed to be adjustments in order to see success in the coming weeks. You saw the first 2 targets of the game going to your tight ends after going 0 for 2 in the first 2 games. 2 targets and 0 catches for the tight ends, Aaron Hackett and Luke Benson, in game 1 and game 2 combined. Then today you see the first pass of the game, first play from scrimmage, goes for a 10-yard pass to Aaron Hackett and a first down just like that, which really sent a message, I think, to everybody who questioned why Syracuse wasn't utilizing the tight ends. I mean, every podcast and radio show that I listened to in the past week, everybody had the same thing to say. Why aren't we utilizing the tight ends? And I think a message was sent on play 1. And then the second play from scrimmage was a throw to the flats to Luke Benson, the other tight end who, oh, by the way, is only a sophomore and had a pretty good season when he had opportunities on the field last year. Now it was thrown into the dirt and the pass wasn't very good, but they still targeted the tight ends on attempt 1 and attempt 2 early on in the ball game, making the offense that much more diverse and showing that there was a new game plan and a new approach offensively and that changes needed to be made. Looking at some more numbers here today, the numbers at the wide receiver position are really something that I wanted to talk about, Sam. Nykeem Johnson, 4 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Taj Harris, pretty similar stats. 3 receptions, 64 yards, and a touchdown. You'd like to think if he had 1 more reception for 4, he'd probably hit that 80 mark just like Nykeem did. So pretty much mirroring stats for them. Jawar Jordan caught a few passes in the flat, 2 receptions, 17 yards. Anthony Quealy, 1 for 15. And beyond that, Aaron Hackett, like I said, that 1 10-yard completion. And really just 2 guys catching footballs here today, Nykeem Johnson and Taj Harris. My question for you, Sam, do we have that number 1 receiver this year like we've had Jamal Custis, Amba Edetawo, Tristan Jackson? I mean, the list goes on and on there. Do we have that? You're Steve Ishmael. Do we have it?
I think this is a different year. Obviously, more reasons than one. But with Johnson and with Harris, I think that is going to be a very interesting, not so much battle, but an inter squad battle between Johnson and Harris for that one spot, because I believe that DeVito is going to be able to rely heavily on both players that going into each game, Johnson and Harris, they're going to be able to put up some pretty big numbers. And yes, 87 and 64 yards, they're sizable numbers, but they're not tremendous, but it's definitely a building block that could blossom into other uh, sort of other routes of success. But I really do think it's going to be a two-person battle for our top receiver race, and that's once again something refreshing to see. Babers is sort of implementing these different aspects of the game, and the receivers are all in, and I like I said, I think it builds our versatility, and because you don't want to just have one good receiver and all your other receivers lacking. It's good to build an offensive repertoire that teams are going to fear when they get on the field.
Yeah, Sam, I will say that I think that today's success offensively was largely due to the fact that the running game and was able to get going at the hands of Sean Tucker. Because looking at numbers here, Tommy DeVito, yes, he had 194 yards, only 13 completions here. And 4 to Nykeem Johnson, 3 to Taj Harris. That's not big numbers, and those are your leading receivers. Everyone else on the list, Sean Tucker, Benson, Aaron Hackett, and Quealy, Jawar Jordan, everyone had one reception besides Jordan with 2. Like, that's not a lot of completions, and I think the yards really add up with the 2 bombs. And other than that, you're not really looking at a hugely successful passing game. Did it get the job done? Absolutely. But I think that if the running game doesn't get going in this game, we're in for another struggle like the previous 2 weeks. Your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, the passing game, those long passes, those long lobs down the field, they're tremendous. But and obviously DeVito utilized his arm a lot. But those short passes, the ones that are basically your gimmies, that could lead to a 10, 20, 30-yard rush, aren't there. It's like one part of the game is up and the other part of the game is severely lacking. And if those two parts of DeVito's passing game don't get on the same page, I think that there's easily going to be a few teams that are going to crack this code and crack this puzzle of DeVito and are going to limit DeVito's scoring opportunities, and we're going to see an offensive performance like we did against Pitt when we only put up 10, or North Carolina when we only put up 6. So even though it had a lot of high points in this game, a 17-point win is phenomenal for our first win of the season. There are definitely a lot of aspects of the game that need to be addressed, and I'm sure Babers is going to address this in the bye week next week before we take the field against Duke on the 10th. But I definitely think in order for us to ensure that we are going to have the most success possible, that the short pass and the tackles need to be the sort of core messages that Babers is getting to his players.
Absolutely, Sam. And I think that credit is due as well today to the offensive line. Kind of stepping up here. Kept DeVito fairly clean. 1 sack on the day, and that's in comparison to 7 last week, which is absolutely mind-blowing that you got sacked 7 times last week. So kudos to the offensive line stepping up this week, keeping DeVito fairly clean with 1 sack on the day. And then as well, obviously opening up opportunities in the run game. The running back can't do it by himself. Although Sean Tucker does seem to be very quick when he gets a burst to the outside, and he kind of has that angle where he's running towards the sideline and heading upfield. He seemed to be very successful with that. So that was exciting to see as well. The speed mixed with the power, pushing it up the field. But kudos to the offensive line for keeping DeVito clean and opening up running lanes. Sam, let's turn it over to the defensive side of the football. This was elite. 5 turnovers forced by this defense here today. I mean, it was an interception party with 4 of them. And then you have the 4th down stop, turnover on downs. And besides that, I think there could have been 7 or 8 turnovers in this game. There was an interception that a pass interference was called on, and the pick gets waved off. And then there were some fumbles that Georgia Tech just luckily were able to fall on top of and keep their drives alive. Otherwise, you're looking at Syracuse getting 8, 7, 8 turnovers here in this game. But this defense played absolutely phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, Georgia Tech scored 20 points. Yeah, there's going to be points scored in a football game, especially when your offense is putting points on the board. That's just the way the game goes. More offensive opportunities, the more points you're going to put on the board, just numbers-wise. But I think this defense played phenomenal, as they have all season. Sam, your thoughts?
Oh yeah, the defensive showing was great. I wouldn't say it's impeccable yet. Obviously, the 20 points put up by the Yellow Jackets, and Gibbs had 105 yards rushing on 18 carries. Griffin had 54 on 15, and Smith 75 rushing yards on 8 carries. So Georgia Tech definitely did sort of run the field. But the good thing is their offense did not. That Smith, Gibbs, Griffin, they did not. I believe Griffin was the only one with a touchdown out of the 3. So they did not turn those yards into big scoring drives. They were, if you want to call it, empty yardage. But going back to the 5 turnovers, that's incredible. 5 turnovers from a relatively, I don't want to call them inexperienced, but sort of a novice team. There was not really a lot of high expectations going into this season. I believe Syracuse was picked last in the ACC. So to see a defense force 5 turnovers and potentially, now it's sort of a shoulda, coulda, woulda scenario, potentially force 7 or 8 turnovers, that's just tremendous. And that's definitely something that you need to give your defense a pat on the back, because had it not been for those 5 turnovers, this game would have been a lot closer.
Yeah, and Tony White, man. I mean, taking this defense at its hands, implementing the 3-3-5, it's exciting. And it's exciting to watch these guys fly around in the secondary. They're putting out athletic players, and that's the whole point of the 3-3-5, to be able to be athletic, stretch the field, be fast. And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's why you see these interception numbers toppling up when you have that extra rover position out there. And they still have been able to get solid pressure on these quarterbacks using the 3-3-5. I mean, typically you're not going to see them rushing 3. What they're doing a lot of the time is they're blitzing a linebacker or 2 as well. But again, the pressure's there, and the secondary's been absolutely phenomenal, as well as the linebacking core, because Michael Jones, as I said, has 2 interceptions on the year. Sam, I think you're absolutely hit the nail right on the head when you say that the rushing attack by Georgia Tech really caught this defense off guard. 275 total yards rushing. That's a high number. That's a high number, but I think the Syracuse defense was able to make up for it, and putting Jeff Sims definitely on the ground and definitely messing with his head a little bit. 4 interceptions for the young quarterback, only a freshman for the Yellow Jackets. But again, Syracuse's defense just proved to be that much better than this Georgia Tech offense. The other thing with this defense, though, today, if we're going to be nitpicky, which I guess we are, is that I think the tackling could have been better. I feel like it was a little lackluster than it had been in the previous 2 weeks. Now, if it was week 1, I probably wouldn't have said that. But since we had seen it be so good in the open field last week and the week before, and then have that not be the case today, that's the one thing I would have to say there.
Oh, yeah. And going back the 2 weeks, having 31 points put up on us by North Carolina, 21 by Pittsburgh, but our tackling is good. That's a red flag, and we outscore Georgia Tech by 17, but our tackling is lackluster. That's a huge football oxymoron, and you don't usually see that. But I think with sort of catching Sims off guard, I think that's it allowed for the defense not to have all like a all negative day, but I think the tackling needs to be addressed, and because having 200 plus yards rushing, you're not going to win a lot of football games that way. And when you're allowing 200 plus yards, and it's that's not going to fly in a game against Clemson, Pittsburgh, who is a very shocking team in the ACC, my potential sleeper within the conference, but and even games against Duke and Wake Forest, those games against the lower tier ACC teams, those games allowing 200 plus rushing yards is not going to fly. And I think we caught Georgia Tech maybe on an off day.
Yeah, Sam, I want to give credit too, as well, at the linebacking core, to some of these young guys. These guys are freshmen coming out here playing with Michael Jones. Jeff Canton, our coup, has been absolutely phenomenal, as well as guys like Marlo Wax are out here, and Stephon Thompson coming in at number 27. I feel like I've seen that number 27 on every big defensive play, putting a body on the quarterback. I think he's one of the best pass rushers we have in the secondary on the second deck, besides the guys pushing up front at the defensive line. So I think these linebackers, the future is bright. I think the secondary's future is bright. This defense is just top notch, and I think it's going to be end up being one of the best defenses in the ACC. Sam, I want to go a quick ahead and give our top moment of the game, and then we're going to do our flames of the game before we go ahead and we take a look at what's to come later on in the season and how this win has really shifted the trajectory of how things will play out in the rest of 2020. Knock on wood, saying that we play the rest of 2020. So, Sam, what's your top moment of the game?
It has to be Trill Williams. We were up by 10 points, and even though I've seen Syracuse blow leads before, plenty of leads in the past, but there's a different presence on the field today. Obviously, I think because it was starting a new era in the Carrier Dome with the new roof and the renovated stadium and the new scoreboard. So maybe they were playing. They didn't want to be remembered as the first team to lose a game in the newly renovated Carrier Dome. They gave that title to Georgia Tech. But the lateral pick six, that was absolutely phenomenal. Carter, he intercepted it and then handed it off to Williams, and he ran it out into the end zone. It just put the icing on the cake, and that's not to diminish Sean Tucker's absolutely tremendous performance. We've talked about Tucker only being a freshman, 2 TDs. Honestly, I think if we're giving out 3, 2, 1 stars, I think Tucker and Williams can be given the 1 and 2 stars.
Absolutely. And now you definitely had the same idea in mind as me. That's my top moment of the game for sure. Jihad Carter goes up in high points of football. Phenomenal interception. I think that was the most athletic interception made today, because a couple of them, not saying they were lucky, not saying that they were any less valuable than ones like that, but that I think was the first time we went and saw a guy in the secondary go up in high point of football and make a read on a play. A couple of the other ones, kind of a little bit of luck plays in when you get a nice bat at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the defense putting pressure on the quarterback, getting a hand in there. That's the big star of that game. And then someone going up and finding it in the air. Trill did it. Josh Black on the defensive line did it. But Jihad Carter goes up and makes an athletic play. And then somewhere in his head, he decides to toss it off to Trill Williams. And Trill is that go-to guy. And I think a lot of what plays into this defense's mindset is that they haven't had a successful offense. So let's put the nail in the coffin in this game right now and go score a touchdown. I think that's exactly what these guys are thinking. Let's not take the risk of giving the offense the ball back. Let's go punch it in ourselves, and that way there's no question. Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's going back to Jihad Carter. I think it speaks to his maturity level as a player, because any player, even the best, could panic in that moment and say, "Uh-oh, what do I do with the football?" But Carter, his pass to Trill Williams, that showed he was already 1-2 steps down the line, and with that pass, that's showing that he, not only Jihad but also Trill Williams, they're both clutch time players. And whether you're playing Georgia Tech, you're playing an FCS low tier squad from the Southland or something, or you're playing the number one team in the nation in Clemson, which Syracuse is playing in a few weeks. You want those down to the wire players that if you're in the driver's seat of the game, or if you're in the position to potentially spark an upset, which we've seen plenty of those in the college football season so thus far, you want to go to those players, and you want, if you're a coach, you want to have more than just one crunch time player that you can say, hey, pass it to him, because he's going to end up in the end zone. You want those. You want to build, much like you're building a defensive repertoire and an offensive repertoire. You want to build those crunch time players that, and this can go without saying in any sport, that can deliver those critical points and potentially game deciding points. Luckily, this was not a big time factor, but it more of an icing on the cake, if you will.
Absolutely, Sam. Now, to move on to our flames of the game, as we call them here on Orange Heat, we'll do them real quick. Offensively and defensively, I give a 1 and 2. My number one here on the offensive side of the football has to go to none other than the freshman running back, Sean Tucker, coming in. Again, 24 carries, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, an average of 4.7 yards per carry. That's pretty darn good considering he's getting yards after contact. He's pushing the football forward. Sam, my defensive guy here in this has to go to Trill Williams, an interception and then that phenomenal return. But there were plenty of factors that played into that, and there were plenty of candidates for that award as well. Sam, who are your 2 guys?
Yeah, I think we have, because we talked about this before we came on air, pretty much the same. Sean Tucker, the level, he is forming the building blocks to a successful career, and now it seems somewhat like we are putting him on a pedestal and glorifying him. And it's only been 3 games of his collegiate career, but when you're playing at the level of ACC football, no matter, I don't care if your team is only winning, if your team is winless one game or they're going undefeated. You are getting quality football and quality players every single time you step on the field, and your competition is going to be top notch in any Power 5 conference, and even in the Group 5 conferences. So Sean Tucker, his development, it is exciting. It is promising for Syracuse football fans, and I hope he stays all 4 years, because I think if by the time even later into the season and into his sophomore season, I think it's going to be the Sean Tucker show on offense. And once DeVito continues to develop, I think matching DeVito with Tucker, that's a match made in heaven. And on defense, Trill Williams, how could you not? It'd be foolish. It's like picking, here's $100,000 compared to $1. Which one are you going to Which one are you going to pick? Clearly the $100,000, and that's Trill Williams, the
cash money trillionaire, as they say.
Yeah, I mentioned this. The maturity level of both Carter and Trill Williams is unmatched. Williams, he really could have gotten stumbled up and in the midfield and not taken it into the end zone, but he stayed on the feet. He stayed on his feet and blocked out the Georgia Tech defenders and scored the, I guess, the game-ending touchdown. So it's very exciting to see the overall play style of these certain players, and I think it allows Syracuse fans to, and even ACC football fans, it allows them to see what these players are all about.
Yeah, Sam, something that we failed to mention today is that Andre Cisco actually did not participate in this football game. He collided with one of his teammates before the game started in the pregame warmups. And he came out and he wore his jersey, did not suit up, and did not participate in this football game. And what stood out to me was Trill Williams kind of stepping up and playing that it factor position that Andre Cisco typically plays on this defense. And he stepped up and became the guy today. Almost had another pick six on his interception that was deflected and got tackled as he was running down the field, but a phenomenal return nonetheless. But again, Andre Cisco did not play. Dino Babers did not have a comment in his press conference as to the severity, if it's an owie, as he says, or if it's a serious injury. Really nothing to touch upon there, and it's a private university. They have that right. And obviously, Dino's not going to give out inadequate information before meeting with team doctors and Cisco himself. So that's a big fat question mark right now. The good thing about that is there's a bye week coming up, Sam, which transitions us perfectly into our ending segment here today on the episode. Is that the trajectory of the rest of this season? A bye week coming up here. Then you have Duke inside the Carrier Dome. And then from there on, you're playing Liberty. Then that's when it gets tough, if it wasn't tough already. Clemson, Wake Forest, Boston College, Louisville, North Carolina, and ending it off with Notre Dame. Sam, let's break this down a little bit. Could the bye week have come at a better time?
Oh yeah, it's definitely. I think I don't want to say quit while you're ahead, but quit while you're ahead. This gives the guys, especially Cisco, time to sort of heal before that game against Duke. And now I'm not saying Duke is this powerhouse. They were blown out by Virginia by 18 earlier today. So I think I truly believe that we beat the Blue Devils by 43 last year, and we beat Liberty by 24 and Wake Forest by 9. We all know how that game against the Deacs ended with that.
That's when Cash Money Trillionaire became a ticketed name there.
Yeah, that stripping turnover and the run back, that was absolutely amazing. So I think the bye week came at such a critical time to allow Babers to go back to the drawing board and fill those holes in the defense. And even though the defense had a tremendous game, but pretty much collect their thoughts. Okay, yes, we got the first win of the season, but we need to keep going. And we mentioned this earlier before we came on air. The NCAA, their oversight committee, announcing that they're planning on allowing any team into a bowl game, which unless if they meet the APR requirements, the academic progress report requirements, which Syracuse being one of the top schools in the nation, I'm sure Dino Babers, he stresses academics first tremendously. So I think what started out as a bleak day for Syracuse football has turned into, I guess, dinner and a show.
It couldn't have been put better than that, Sam. Obviously, Syracuse is going to kick off at Duke. Game time, not known just yet. That comes out on Monday around lunchtime, they say, is when they're going to announce the game time for kickoff. That's going to be inside the Carrier Dome. 2 home games coming up in that beautiful new stadium with the roof.
Absolutely.
Video
amazing.
board. And I thought the coolest thing that I wasn't expecting is how the lights can go out now. Now they don't have those old lanterns up there.
I know.
Now they got fancy LEDs. They can turn the lights out. They call it special effects lighting. They had some orange lights and blue lights on a touchdown. It got dark in there. I can only imagine for basketball how they're going to have court projections and everything they can do in that facility. So 2 home games after we come back from the bye. Then you have to go on the road at Clemson. I don't even know if I have anything to say about that right now. Then you have to play Wake Forest on Halloween. Should be a fun one against the Demon Deacons on Halloween inside the Dome, who don't look great but don't look bad. I thought expected a little bit more out of them considering the success they were able to have last year. But you lose quarterback Jamie Newman, and now you're depending on Sam Hartman and everything. Obviously, you have your go-to wide receiver not playing as well. So things change there for the Demon Deacons and the trajectory of their season. You got Boston College at the Dome. Louisville's always tough to play on the road. NC State in the Dome, who NC State looks good as well. Boston College looks good. Louisville looks good. These are all ranked programs right now. And then Notre Dame. So it doesn't get any easier after Duke and Liberty. It really doesn't. But Sam, if you're going trajectory based, how many wins can you see this team racking up? Because coming into this today, if you told me that we were going to win 2 or 3 more games, I probably would have said you're crazy. And I'm being completely honest with you, because I thought going into this game, Syracuse might be able to squeak out a win against Liberty and then catch that upset somehow where they come out and beat like a Wake Forest or a Boston College or an NC State. But it looked bad. It looked really bad, especially from the offensive perspective. Sam, now seeing what you saw today and the differences on offense and how studly this defense is, what's your trajectory for the rest of the season?
So in my prep, I broke down the games, the wins, the probable wins, the most likely losses, and the question marks. And wins, Duke, I think Duke looks sloppy against Bears, and Virginia is really we know the who's for being a basketball school, but Virginia's football program is coming around, and Duke just had no answers for the Cavaliers. Liberty, me personally, I don't even think we should be playing against the Flames. Due to the COVID pandemic, their mishandling of it all, but that's a completely different. That's a win. And Wake Forest. Wake Forest's game against the Fighting Irish got postponed due to an outbreak on Notre Dame's team. So that's going to be obviously the game against Wake Forest is a little bit more than a month away, but I think those are your 3 wins. Now your probable losses, Clemson. We lost to them 41-6 last year. That Clemson is looking is looking good, and as they are always. Coach Dabo, he's a tremendous coach. Pair that with Trevor Lawrence, and you really have a match made in heaven. Louisville, we did lose to them by 22 last year, 56-34. However, I will say, yes, they did play number 21 Pittsburgh on the road today and lost 23-20. So, but I don't think Syracuse has the pieces to beat the Cards, and I believe that game is in Louisville. So, playing on the road at Louisville, that's never easy. And the game against Notre Dame, we haven't played them in 2 years when we were a 10-3 squad, and obviously this is a tremendously different squad and team than it was 2 years ago. We lost 36-3, even though we were a top 15 team in the nation at some points. Then Notre Dame is looking like they're a potential college football playoff team. I wish they would just rip the Band-Aid off and leave the independents and join the ACC for football. I think it would make a different atmosphere in the ACC. I think it would boost our I guess strength of the conference in terms of football. And then my question mark games. NC State right now they're down 31-10. Yes, they're playing against number 20 Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech hasn't played this season, but NC State not looking that great. And they played against Wake Forest last week and eked out a win, 45-42. So Wake Forest, yes, they're missing pieces, but they're a sneaky squad. NC State, realistically, they should be 0-2. And I think the dynamic of the conversation would change with the game against NC State. We lost to them 16-10 last year. And finally, Boston College, that's a question mark. They eked out a win against Texas State from the Sun Belt 24-21. So that's a very that's also another question mark game. So I think we could potentially get 4 wins, maybe up to 6, but I think 6 is the ceiling.
Sam, I mean, everything I could have possibly said, you just covered there. I think we have really the same mindset on this team right now after what we saw today. I think we're in agreement on the question mark games being Boston College, NC State. Teams that were better than should be Duke, Liberty, and Wake Forest. Wake Forest being the toughest out of those three, I think. I'm almost more apt to move that to a question mark, but I'm going to hold off there. I think Duke might be at the same level as Georgia Tech, truly at their core. And I think Liberty, we have to smack Liberty in the face and kind of send a message going into that Clemson game if we want to see success. Sam, I'm going to say that depending on how Notre Dame is at the end of the year, how they are health wise, if they're banged up, if they're upset that they might have lost a game or two and knocked themselves out of the playoffs, I could see Syracuse going into South Bend and making that a game. More so than I could see Syracuse making Clemson a game just because of the talent Clemson has. Although we have, had Clemson's number the past couple of years, besides last season, of course. But Notre Dame doesn't really, we don't play them year in and year out like we do some of the teams that are in the Atlantic division of the Atlantic Coast Conference. And I could see Syracuse going in and making that interesting for sure. Especially with how highly touted this defense is. I think you're going to be able to hold Ian Book in that offense to lower than they would like to score. But I'm excited about the rest of the season. I'm finally excited about Syracuse football almost just as much as I was week one when they kicked things off down in Chapel Hill. It's back. And I think we're lucky to be watching college football in general, Sam. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And going back to Ian Book and Notre Dame, a few years ago when Notre Dame was in the college football playoff, Ian Book fell apart against Oklahoma, if I'm correct. And you're going to get a lot more, I think, Trevor Lawrence is, even though he's younger than Book, you're going to get more maturity and more a more in-depth from Trevor Lawrence and Clemson than you were going to get from Ian Book. He's a very I don't want to say unstable quarterback. He's has when he decides to not be on his game, he's not on his game. Trevor hasn't seen that. We have not seen from him a game against Notre Dame.
Sam, you're cutting out on me a little bit, and actually, he completely ended up timing out there. We're going to pause this real quick. We'll be right back, see if we can wrap things up here on Orange Sheet with Giovanni Heater. Thank you for sticking with us with the technical difficulties. We're back. Thank you for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. Actually, this is the first problem I've ever had with Zoom in all the time I've been using it for recording everything, whether it be stuff for CNS athletics at school or whether it be stuff for you guys on Orange Heat. So, not bad. Not bad that we made it throughout an entire quarantine, probably about 6 months, no, maybe like 5 months of using Zoom. And this is the first time we've ever timed out and had a problem. So not bad, but we got Sam back. And Sam, I think we've covered pretty much everything we could possibly want to cover here. Thank you to everyone who made it this far. And I think we're in a position to wrap things up. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be exciting to see the development of this team and see if they can carry the torch from this game against Georgia Tech into the games against Duke, Liberty, Clemson, and so on.
Yeah, and I think this win comes at the perfect time because the last thing you want to go into a bye week, the last thing you want to do is go into a bye week off of a loss, especially an 0-3 season at that point. So they can utilize this fuel, use it in the bye week, get healthy, implement game plans and everything to prepare for the coming weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if they not overlook Duke and Liberty, especially not Duke, but they start preparing this week maybe not this week, but next week or the week after for that Clemson game, and starting to sort of look ahead down the road a little bit. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, man. I thought we had a lot of fun. I think we meshed together well, and it's been
Oh,
an absolute
definitely.
blast. We've been wanting to do this for a while. Before we say goodbye, why don't you go ahead and plug your socials so people know where to find you?
Yeah, so follow me on Twitter at sambarber_TV. And then for Instagram, you can follow me at sambam_02. I'll be posting a highlight of this interview on both my Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, so give me a follow. I post sports content, my thoughts on the leagues across the country. So yeah, give me a follow.
Sam, a young and upcoming broadcaster as myself, and we're hoping someday, if everything works out the way we plan, that my dream school, obviously Newhouse at Syracuse, and Sam looking at Newhouse for grad school amongst other institutions as well. So maybe someday we'll be working in real life together. But Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Everybody, you can find more Orange Sheet action, of course, on the Twitter at GeoHeater and on the Instagram at Giovanni Heater. Leave a like, a comment, and subscribe if you've made it this far. And of course, Sam, let's go Orange, baby. Woo!
Orange.
For Sam Barber, my name's Giovanni Heater, and we are out.